Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Georgia MAGA on Tommy Time. Let me get these headphones off. Hearing my own voice is distracting. Thanks for tuning back in. It's been more than a extended hiatus. I had not fully intended that. I don't know if I indicated when I was last on the channel that I would be on a little bit of a break, but it even went further than I intended for it to the point that I guess it's been a couple of months now since I actually put something up. And so, for those that I invited, begged, whatever, however you want to characterize those uh, requests to join the channel, thank you for doing that again. And thank you for checking back in. And we're going to try to keep things a little bit on a more regular track. I believe that's been an earlier promise as well, but we do the best we can. Again, had a few things, business and personal wise, intervened, but we're back and got lots going on. So when I was last with you, it was the opt out for the homestead exemption, which is something that I fully intend to get back to because that is far from over. And at least to me, it's far from over. And obviously, the big issue that has itself intervened since things intervened to keep me away is the return of rendering to Franklin County. For those who happen not to be around, or just as a quick review, Pilgrim's Pride tried to build a plant in Franklin County about 4 years ago at the intersection of Highway 320 and I-85. And through the good work of our now Commissioner Elizabeth Busby, at that time just a volunteer activist, or let's not say just this takes that sort of interest and commitment that gets anything done. So don't mean that in a minimizing way in any way, shape, or form, because what she was able to do, along with the essentially army of um, citizens that got behind her and got behind the issue, I think she would even say more importantly, was to successfully beat that back. And that was an issue of just simply whether or not you come down on the side of that sort of industry, or a rendering plant specifically uh, needs to be in Franklin County. It definitely wasn't the place for it there. So we're back. This time, Franklin Springs is the area. And I think enough on Advanced Franklin, which, just by the way, for those who may have watched this before, and if I hadn't mentioned, I am a co administrator of, so full disclosure there. Myself and David Gaines, who has recently, I understand, been selected our new GOP county chairman here in Franklin County. So congratulations, David. Have been administrating that for I guess it's been a couple of years together. David had been handling it with Elizabeth before she was elected to the commission, all the way back to when it was called Stop the Rendering Group on Facebook. Of course, it evolved into Advanced Franklin. So, little bit of quick history there too. But anyway, getting on to the original rendering history, which, well, I think enough said that that was successfully stopped with all of the great commitment and hard work of folks that just absolutely made it clear that that would not be welcome in Franklin County. So I'm gonna, take for granted, based on what I've seen in Advanced Franklin, that 90% of folks that are going to look at this video, especially based on the thumbnail that it's a local issue, are going to be familiar, because it is the first, last, and always topic, I think, on the local level around here right now of what's going on with pilgrims this time around, um, which starts with people being taken surprise by um, a development in the county that they learned about last minute. This gets back to communication. And now I think there has been plenty of instances on other issues, frankly, opt out being one, where that was a pretty innocent uh, lack of communication. Not that I don't think that could have been addressed. It could have been. It could have been planned for if you knew that it was coming sometime last year, back to October. That's that's plenty of time to start making your citizens aware and not causing heartburn among those of us who hear higher taxes and start getting our radar up. But be that as it may, on this issue, based on the way that it has been brought to light, it appears that there may have been some efforts to keep this from coming to the attention of people until it was proverbially too late. And whether or not that is in fact the case, even at this stage, I think it's hard to say from a contractual standpoint, because to my knowledge, as far as a rendering plant for Franklin Springs or anywhere in Franklin County, I don't know that anybody has still seen that. But what has been seen is some communications between the mayor of Franklin Springs, the um, official person, representative of Pilgrim's Pride. I think his name was, well, in the paperwork, I think it was a fellow named, no, it was Mark Worth. That's right, or someone named Worth. And anyway, the names are there. Instead of me hashing them out, maybe I'll link to them or something like that if I can find them to put in this for people to look at for themselves. It's all been on Advanced Franklin. Again, most people probably familiarize themselves that way. But essentially, a whole series of communications have been brought to light that show that there's been some discussion between city officials of Franklin Springs and some engineering firm and engineering firm and Pilgrim's Pride about a potential rendering plant in Franklin Springs. Okay. I attended one meeting with regard to this. Didn't, from my perspective, go particularly well for the city council. They were the ones that held it over in Franklin Springs. And since I think there's been some of these I've not been able to attend, meetings at the county commission. I know I've been to at least one of those. But where I think it stands right now, and just frankly what concerns me, is the reactions of our elected officials. In the case of Franklin Springs, uh, the one lady got up, asked her question, the entire council refused to answer. And it's clear that there's been communication about a rendering plan and the impact that would have on the proposed wastewater treatment facility that's been in the works for obviously over a year and probably longer. I don't know the exact timetable on its origin, but a considerable period of time in Franklin Springs. I mean, you're an elected official. people ask questions, you owe them an explanation. I mean, that's basic civics more than anything else. I frankly, the IBA, uh, the Livonia mayor, wrote a long column in the paper last week. I appreciate that as elected officials that they are dealing with facts day to day that not everybody else is or has reason to, so on and so forth. But that's not a source of uh, unique wisdom or anything. And when questions come up and people have given you the privilege, quite frankly, and elected you to a position to serve them, I think it's just not wise to treat that as a personal attack. Yeah, everybody's not going to be nice all the time, but I think the way to handle that is with more information, not less. And it's particularly not to attack them back. So I think that's politics 101 mistakes, top of the list. As far as our county commission goes, I think for folks who don't like the rendering plant, and that is the bulk of the discussion in Advance Franklin, which seems to be the target of either those who don't like the criticism or is the focus for those who are trying to, from their perspective, get the word out of something bad that's coming the community's way. The commission, I believe, has their perspective pretty well right in terms of hearing the concerns of citizens and taking them seriously. But I also think that there needs to be a lot of caution taken with regard to things like Senate staffers showing up to meetings. And quite frankly, there are people that are in some of these public meetings representing organizations that, as a lifelong conservative Republican, I'm got a strong suspicion have agendas beyond just protecting the landscape and property of Franklin Countyans. I mean, a lot of these folks, I've got some strong feeling, particularly in the case of the Senator Warnock staffers, that there's a leftist environmental agenda there. I mean, Warnock is, I think the last time it was looked at was had the most liberal voting record in the United States Senate. I think he's even passed Bernie Sanders. So there's a lot more to them showing up, I would expect, than just benign concern. Senate staffs are limited. I mean, obviously, this is starting to gain some attention. Even I don't know if any of the Atlanta stations have picked this up yet, but I know there have been efforts to try to do that. I know it's obviously our radio has picked it up a couple of times, local radio, I think it is, at least on the website. Um, so sure, they're going to at some level pay attention to that, but this is the kind of issue that folks that I would just quite flat out regard as environmental leftists and tree huggers will try to demagogue. And the other thing that concerns me, quite frankly, is by doing things like passing resolutions. I'm all in favor of people having a say in how their community is developed. That was my position with regard to the last time this came up, and it's my position now. And it won't be just because of rendering any kind of quote unquote bad industry, or at least industry not appropriate for the site that's being considered. But you start calling in the state to uh, involve itself in something like this, and you're going to end up with a lot of micromanaging, maybe some regulations, maybe some policies you put in place that you'll regret later, particularly when you are trying to get a good industry in here and you've hamstrung yourself with a bunch of, again, rules and regulations that uh, cause you to become unattractive. I just think there's just a lot of consideration that needs to go into all of this stuff before you start jumping off into reactions without a considered strategy. So to recap, a rendering plant at Franklin Springs, no matter how you feel about rendering plants in Franklin County, that's not the place for it. Next, Franklin Springs, next to Emmanuel College, just down the road from Royston, at the busiest intersection in the county, if I'm not mistaken, traffic wise. Just not the right place for it, just like it wasn't the right place for it at 320 and I-85, some of the most ideal otherwise business development in the county. Uh, we could do a lot better than a rendering plant there too. If our elected officials hope to keep from careening from crisis to crisis, something seriously has to change in the level of communication, the strategy, responsibility for it, because taking the attitude that, hey, I got elected, I'm doing this every day, and I know more than you do. I mean, you may not want to keep the job very long if that's the case. Maybe that's the way to go about it. But I think in most cases, folks are getting elected with the idea of at least trying to be effective. And even if you, in your own mind, are effective, but and only serve a term or two, you're making things a lot more difficult for yourself by, going at people, uh, questioning their motives, at the absolute worst, attacking them. Um, they put you there to respond to them. You're not going to accomplish anything by telling people either you know more than they do or that you're stupid, that they're stupid. That's just common sense, but I guess I've felt the need to say it, and I think it is needed, else I wouldn't be doing it. So, lastly, the longer term concern, I think this is a big one too, is uh, being so short sighted, myopic that you react without a lot of forethought. I mean, at the end of the day, a resolution is not binding, as a few have pointed out on Advanced Franklin, but you know, you get started involved in talking about things like bringing in the state from the outside, and uh, you're opening the door. You get staffers from uh, a Democrat senator's office when this has been a Republican county since at least the early 90s to my account. Um, well, probably late 90s, but regardless, well over 30, well in the neighborhood of 30 years, the amount of time I've been in politics. Um, you're going to real quickly find yourself dealing with and de- uh, uh, confronted by a whole other set of new problems um, that you essentially opened the door to. And specifically, again, as I said earlier, by um, making yourself subject to a bunch of regulations, rules, policies, uh, programs that uh, Democrats, liberals, leftists, regulators, bureaucrats, all the things that conservatives and limited government people tend to hate in the name of the environment or saving the broad or uh, protecting people's homes, which won't protect people's homes, but you also want to have a way to pay for that home. And by doing that, the way to do that is to be attractive ultimately to industry, which this county ultimately is going to have to attract something. And once again, I don't mean to beat the dead horse. I'm I was against rendering last time. I'm against rendering this time for the stated reasons. Where it's being proposed is not the right place for it. But lashing yourself out of what seems like convenience to stop something to folks you generally otherwise uh, would go running the opposite direction is probably going to pretend problems in the future. You got to develop a plan and think it through. And maybe that means for now, because in the way that this has been brought to light, that you get out of the wastewater treatment plant if you're at the county and you start addressing things like the IBA and either them or create some sort of program in the county that starts getting serious about the kind of industry you do want here. Because I mean that's the bottom line. Um, if that does not happen, then ultimately what this county is looking at is a bunch of rooftops that drive the property values up to the point that people can't pay the taxes because the property is eventually going to get sold. There's just no way around that. It's just the real world. I mean, I um, would love to want to see Franklin stay as rural as it possibly can. And the way for that to happen to the extent that it can is for planning. But ultimately, with the development that we are facing from Athens, from Anderson, from Greenville, from I-85, from Atlanta, the only way that happens is by getting good industry that can take the tax burden off of the rooftops that will inevitably come here. They're coming whether you do that or not. And if you don't do that, you're going to be forced to sell because someone else beside you, whether it's because they can't pay the taxes or they don't live here and don't want the property anyway, is going to and be the proverbial fait accompli. There's got to be a plan. There's got to be a plan for communication short term. There's got to be a plan for development long term. And you can't do any of that if you can't communicate and you can't um, show respect, frankly, for people with a different point of view, whether you're in the same party or a different party. So I probably run the clock out on my recorder here. So anyway, thanks everybody that takes a look at these things. I appreciate if you'll subscribe. For those of y'all who came back to subscribe the last time, I thank you. I hope you'll stick with me, and I'll promise to try to be a little more regular and hopefully a little more smooth than I've been tonight. But hadn't had anything out there in a while, and I thought it was probably time. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.